Letter to the reader, you are about to step into the oldest and most brutal legend in the history of Western literature. Known as the oldest epic poem in the English language, Beowulf is not some dusty, boring classic. Written thousands of years ago against the cold, unforgiving backdrop of the Nordic seas, this is the story of a man with unimaginable, overwhelming strength. It is a story of a hero who rips apart demons crawling from hell and tears into a massive fire-breathing dragon using only his bare hands and steel blades. It is, quite simply, an insane action blockbuster. The miracle that survived the flames, the fact that this story even reached your hands today, is a miracle in itself. Despite being the oldest heroic epic recorded in English, Beowulf survived the centuries through a single, battered manuscript. In 1731, a horrific library fire nearly reduced this sole original text to ash. Barely surviving the inferno with its edges literally scorched black, this document leaped across 1,000 years to reach us today. Why must you read Beowulf now? From J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings to the countless fantasy web novels we devour today. The roots of every modern fantasy trope, swords, magic, overpowered heroes, and massive dragons, trace directly back to Beowulf. You are not just reading a classic novel. You are witnessing the explosive birth of the first overpowered hero in human history and the very origin of the fantasy genre itself. This work was originally composed in Old English poetry, but we have boldly stripped away the stiff poetic structure. Instead, we have completely reimagined this majestic tale with narrative-driven storytelling, so that anyone can read it easily and casually, exactly like a thrilling, fast-paced modern novel. Are you ready? Turn the page, shatter the heavy doors of Heorot, the Golden Hall of Denmark, and step into a world of echoing screams and legendary glory. Prologue. The first king sailed seething upon the blood and bones of great kings. The age of myth sets its glorious sail. Listen up. We all know the bloody legends of the ancient Danish kings. Back in the day, these warlords carved out their empires with steel and fury. Sailed Seething was the most brutal of them all. He didn't just defeat his enemies. He smashed their mead halls, shattered their armies, and struck pure terror into their hearts. He started from nothing, found drifting on the brutal sea as a helpless, abandoned bastard. But he didn't stay weak for long. He grew into a titan under the heavens, crushing his trauma and forging his own honor in blood. Before long, every tribe across the freezing waves learned to fear him. They bent the knee, paid him tribute in heavy gold, and called him their master. Now that was a king. God himself took pity on the leaderless Danes and gave Scyld a son. The boy's name was Beow. Heaven knew the people needed a champion, and Beow's legendary name quickly echoed across the savage northern lands. Even as a young prince, Beow knew the game. You bleed gold now, so your warriors will bleed for you later. He showered his men with treasure. When war eventually crashed against their shores, his hardened fighters stood by his side, ready to butcher anyone who challenged him. Generosity buys loyalty, and loyalty wins wars. When Scyld's time ran out, he died as he lived, a conqueror. His elite guard carried his body to the icy shoreline, executing the final orders of their warlord. A deadly, ice-clad warship waited in the harbor, its curved prow cutting the freezing wind. The ultimate hero's vessel. His men laid their fallen king right at the base of the mast. They didn't bury him in dirt, they buried him in wealth. Piles of plundered treasure, gleaming armor, and razor-sharp weapons from across the world surrounded his lifeless body. No man had ever seen a more glorious funeral ship. It was a floating armory. A mountain of gold weighed down the king's chest, ready to sink with him into the abyss. They loaded him up with far more treasure than the pathetic scraps he had when he washed ashore as an orphan. Finally, they hoisted a blazing golden banner high above his head, letting it snap in the howling wind. They shoved the ship out into the dark, violent ocean. The Danes stood on the freezing coast, their hearts heavy and their throats tight, watching their greatest king drift into the unknown. To this day, not the smartest scholars nor the most scarred veterans can tell you what shore Scyld Seething finally washed up on. Chapter 1. Heorot and the beast, a curse strikes the golden hall, and the songs of celebration drown in bloody screams. Beowulf the Dane held the throne for years, a beloved king stepping into the massive shoes of his father, Scyld. Beowulf's bloodline ran hot and heavy, passing on to his son, Half-Dane, a ruthless warlord who ruled with an iron fist and a sharp mind. Half-Dane crushed all opposition, leaving behind a prosperous kingdom and 4 heirs: Heorot, Hrothgar, Helga the Good, and a fierce daughter who took the hand of the Swedish king, Wunla. It was Hrothgar who truly forged a legacy of blood and glory. Success followed him like a shadow, and his warband swelled into an unstoppable army. Flush with victory, Hrothgar commanded the construction of a monument to his dominance, a feast hall to dwarf all others. He ordered tribes from every corner of the earth to build and decorate a hall unlike anything the world had ever seen. When the dust settled, the massive stronghold stood complete. He named it Heorot. Inside those towering walls, Hrothgar made good on his promises. He showered his warriors with gold, rings, and looted treasures. Heorot was a towering symbol of power, a glittering beacon in a dark world, even though it was doomed to burn in the ashes of a future blood feud. But the booming laughter echoing from Heorot woke something terrible. Deep in the rotting swamps, a creature of pure malice writhed in agony. Every day, the relentless sounds of celebration tore at his sanity, the plucking of harps, the thundering stomps of drunken warriors, the poets singing of the Almighty ripping the earth from the waters and hanging the sun in the sky. The noise drove him mad. His name was Grendel. He was a nightmare forged in hellfire, a hulking abomination stalking the shadowed borders of the kingdom. Cursed by God as a blood relative of Cain, Grendel was born from the first murder. From that ancient sin spawned every giant, ghoul, and demon that crawled the earth, and Grendel was the deadliest of them all. Now he set his sights on Heorot. The age of happiness for Hrothgar's men was over. The slaughter was about to begin. Chapter 2. Grendel's bloodlust and the fall of Heorot. The Danes fall into despair, shedding tears of blood as they wait for salvation. Night fell, and Grendel stalked toward the great hall. The demon wanted to see how the legendary Danish warriors spent their time after draining their mead horns. He found them sprawled across the floor, dead to the world in a drunken sleep, completely oblivious to the nightmare closing in. The starved beast didn't hesitate. He struck with savage fury. Clawing through the darkness, Grendel ripped 30 warriors straight from their beds. He didn't just kill them, he butchered them. Hoisting their mangled bodies over his massive shoulders, he tore back to his swampy lair, roaring in triumph over his bloody prize. When dawn broke, the surviving warriors woke to a slaughterhouse. The joyous echoes of last night's feast were dead, replaced by the screams of the living. King Hrothgar, the great and famous warlord, slumped in his high seat, utterly broken. His heart shattered as he stared at the bloody footprints left by the cursed fiend. This wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. The horror was too raw, the loss too massive, and it wasn't over. Just one night later, Grendel returned for more blood. He felt no pity, no remorse. His soul was rotting with pure, unadulterated evil. After that second strike, it didn't take a genius to realize Heorot was a death trap. Men scattered, choosing to sleep far away from the grand hall. Once the monster's relentless bloodlust became undeniable, anyone with half a brain abandoned the golden mead hall. Fleeing was the only way to stay alive. Grendel took the throne of darkness. He waged a one-monster war against the Danes, fighting dirty and tearing them apart until the once glorious Heorot stood totally abandoned. For 12 agonizing years, King Hrothgar choked on his grief. The brutal truth spread like wildfire across the lands. Bards sang grim tales of Grendel's endless war against Hrothgar, a relentless, bloody campaign season after season. The demon didn't want a truce. He didn't care about gold, treaties, or paying the blood price. Nobody bargained with this beast. He was the shadow of death, hunting seasoned veterans and young boys alike. Night after night, Grendel ruled the misty moors. No mortal could track where these hellspawn disappeared to when the sun came up. The enemy of mankind made Heorot his personal playground in the dark. He committed unspeakable horrors within those beautiful walls. But there was one thing he could never do. He could never touch Hrothgar's sacred throne. The beast was entirely cursed, barred forever from the warmth of God's love and the holy seat of power. It was a nightmare era for Hrothgar. His surviving warlords scrambled, holding desperate councils to figure out a battle plan against the unstoppable force. When steel and strategy failed, they turned to blind desperation. They burned offerings at pagan shrines, screaming into the void for their old gods to save them. It was all they knew. They cast their thoughts down to the fires of hell, blind to the true Creator, the judge of all deeds. They didn't know how to call upon the Lord of Heaven, and so the darkness raged on. Chapter 3. The hero of Geatland, Beowulf. Giants piercing through the storm, the Geat warriors drop anchor on the shores of the Danes. Hrothgar sat in his misery. The grief was endless, gnawing at the old king. No wisdom or wealth could cure the bleeding wound Grendel had torn in his kingdom. The butchery was relentless, disgusting, and completely merciless. It was Denmark's worst nightmare, dragged out year after bloody year. Across the bitter sea in Geatland, the stories of Grendel's slaughter reached a warrior named Beowulf. He served King Hygelac. Beowulf was no ordinary man. He was the most massive, dangerous, and powerful fighter alive. He didn't hesitate. Beowulf ordered his men to prep a heavy warship.
"The Danish king needs killers to defend his hall,"
Beowulf declared.
"I'm crossing the ocean to answer."
His people loved him, and the elders dreaded seeing him leave, but they wouldn't dare hold him back. They read the omens, cheered the hero on, and prepared his men for war. Beowulf handpicked 14 of the most lethal Geatish warriors. They marched to the shore, guided by a hardened sea captain. The sea churned against the sand below the high cliffs. They piled onto the timber ship, loading the hull with gleaming chainmail, heavy shields, and deadly weapons. With a massive heave, they thrust the warship into the open sea. The wind grabbed the sails. The ship tore across the waves like a bird of prey, cutting through the whitecaps. By the second day, the opposite shoreline erupted from the horizon. They locked eyes on steep hills, shining sea cliffs, and broad headlands. The crossing was done. The Geats hit the beach hard, tying the longship off and jumping into the surf. Their heavy armor rattled with every step. They offered a swift prayer to God for a fast, unbroken crossing. High on the bluffs, the Danish coast guard spotted them. He watched heavily armed strangers hauling shields and spears down the gangplank. The guard mounted his warhorse, charged down to the shoreline, and shook a massive spear in their faces.
"Who the hell are you?"
The guard roared.
"You sail a warship onto our shores, fully armed and locked in chainmail. I watch these cliffs to keep raiders out of Denmark, and nobody just lands here in broad daylight. You have no passwords. You have no permission."
He locked eyes with Beowulf and paused.
"I've never seen a warrior as massive as your leader,"
he admitted, lowering his spear an inch.
"You're no standard guard. You carry yourself like a warlord. But before you take one more step onto Danish soil, I need to know your bloodlines. No spies walk out of here alive. Speak up and make it quick."
Chapter 4. The arrival, the unstoppable march of a hero, knocking on the heavy doors of the great golden hall. The leader of the band stepped up, his voice slicing through the wind.
"We are Geats,
He declared.
sworn blades of King Hygelac. My father was the warlord Exio. He carved a bloody legend, lived a long life, and died a respected man. Wise men everywhere still speak his name with reverence.
He met the guard's gaze without blinking.
We come in peace, seeking your lord Hrothgar, king of the Danes. Show us the way. We carry a critical message for your king, and we don't hide in the shadows."
He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble.
"You know if the rumors are true. We heard some nightmare is butchering your men, a phantom spreading slaughter and shame through the black nights. I've come to give Hrothgar the strategy he needs to crush this demon. I will give him his peace, or he will suffer until his beautiful hall is nothing but ash."
The coast guard tightened his grip on his spear and spoke from his warhorse.
A real warrior knows the difference between empty talk and cold steel. But I believe you. I see you are true allies to the Danish king.
He gestured inland.
March forward with your weapons bare. I will lead you to his court. My men will guard your ship on the sand, keeping it safe until you sail back to Geatland. A warrior who marches into danger with that kind of fire is bound to survive the slaughter.
They moved out, leaving their ship anchored tight against the surf. The Geat warriors marched in tight formation. Golden boars snarled from the crests of their heavy helmets, ancient wards forged to cheat death in battle. They pushed a relentless pace until Hrothgar's legendary hall broke the horizon. It was a fortress wrapped in gold, the most glorious building in the known world, its light burning like a beacon across the brutal lands. The guard pointed his spear at the shining mead hall.
There it is, march straight for the doors.
He wheeled his heavy horse around.
My watch calls me back to the shore. May the Almighty shield you in the blood to come. I ride to hunt for raiders.
Chapter 5. The King's Herald, Wulfgar the Arrival of the Burdened One. A savior stands before the eyes of Hrothgar. A cobblestone road led the Geatish warband straight to the towering mead hall of Heorot. Iron rings clattered and chainmail scraped as they marched, battle-hardened and utterly fearless. Weary from the violent ocean crossing, they unslung their heavy shields and slammed them against Heorot's timber walls. The men threw themselves onto the wooden benches, their armor chiming like a death knell. They stacked their deadly ashwood spears in the corner, gray iron tips gleaming with brutal promise. These weren't mere travelers. They were a strike force bristling for war. A proud Danish officer strode out to block their path. He eyed their gear and demanded their names.
Where did you haul these gilded shields, these scarred helmets, and those lethal spears?
He barked.
I am Hrothgar's herald, and I'll tell you this, I've never seen a band of strangers walk onto our shores looking this dangerous. You didn't come here running as exiles, you came here hunting for glory.
Beowulf, the giant of a man leading the Geats, didn't flinch. From beneath the shadow of his war helm, his voice rumbled with absolute calm.
We are King Hygelac's chosen,
Beowulf said.
and my name is Beowulf. I have a mission for Hrothgar, your legendary king. Take me to him.
The herald was Wulfgar, a chieftain of the Wendels known just as much for his cunning mind as his bloody blade. He nodded, recognizing raw power when he saw it.
I will take your words to the Lord of the Danes.
Wulfgar promised.
I'll deliver your demand and bring back his command, whatever it may be.
Wulfgar spun on his heel and marched into the great hall. He wove through the crowded benches until he stood before Hrothgar, the old and battle-scarred king, flanked by his fiercest warlords. Wulfgar offered a crisp, formal salute, then broke the silence.
My king, a warband from Geatland has just made landfall. They tore through the ocean to get here. Their commander is a beast of a man named Beowulf.
Wulfgar lowered his voice, his tone urgent.
They want an audience with you, my lord. Do not turn them away. I've seen their armor and I've seen their eyes. They are elite killers, and the warlord who leads them is a force of nature.
Chapter 6. Face to face with King Hrothgar, an oath to cast aside weapons, declaring a bare-handed bloodbath with the monster. Hrothgar, the scarred king of the Danes, took Wulfgar's report and cracked a grim smile.
I knew Beowulf when he was just a whelp. His bloodline is pure steel, son of Ecthio, born of Geatish royalty. Now that boy has grown into a monster of a man, and he's come hunting for a fight alongside a true ally.
The king leaned forward, his eyes gleaming in the firelight.
My sailors claim this warrior packs the strength of 30 men in a single fist. I swear, the gods themselves must have hurled this champion at us to crush Grendel's skull. I'll shower him in gold if he has the guts to do it.
Hrothgar slammed his fist on the throne.
Move, bring the Geats in. Let them stand among our fiercest lords and know the Danes embrace them.
Wulfgar bolted to the hall's massive doors. He faced the waiting Geats and roared.
My king knows your bloodline. You've crossed the crushing sea, and he welcomes you to Heorot.
Wulfgar's gaze hardened.
You march in wearing your armor. Keep your helmets on, but leave your shields and killing steel out here until the king has taken your measure.
Beowulf rose like a titan of war, his elite squad falling into line behind him. With a sharp gesture, he ordered a handful of his men to hold the perimeter and guard their weapons. The rest surged forward. Wulfgar led the heavy-armored strike team straight into the belly of Heorot. Beowulf didn't flinch. He marched like a storm tearing through the great hall, his helmet gleaming with raw menace, until he planted his boots dead center before the Danish king. Chapter 7. Beowulf's pledge to fight Grendel provoked by the jealousy of Unferth. The hero answers with a tale of sea monster slaughter. Beowulf spoke, his iron mail clinking and gleaming like silver fire in the torchlight.
Hail, Hrothgar!
He roared.
I am King Hygelac's nephew, his fiercest warrior. I've bathed in the blood of my enemies since I was a boy. Word of Grendel's butchery reached my homeland. Sailors told us how this mighty hall sits empty, a ghost town the moment the sun dips below the horizon. My elders urged me to come. They know my power. They've seen me return from slaughter, soaked in the gore of my foes. I chained 5 giants, wiped their clan from the earth, and strangled sea beasts in the freezing ocean depths. I crushed those who dared harm my people. Now Grendel is mine. I will face this demon alone. So I ask one favor, Lord of the Danes, do not deny me, for I have crossed the world for this fight. Let me and my men alone cleanse Heorot. They say this abomination scorns weapons in his bloodlust. So be it. To honor my uncle, King Hygelac, I won't touch a sword or shield. I will meet the fiend with my bare hands. Flesh against flesh, life against life. Whoever dies will fall to the judgment of God. If the beast wins, he will gorge on my warriors right here, just as he slaughtered yours. You won't need to dig a grave. He will drag my shredded corpse back to his swamp and feast on my bones. Don't waste time mourning. But if I fall, send my armor back to Hygelac. It's an ancient treasure forged by Welland himself. Let fate decide our bloody end.
Chapter 8. Blood debts and bitter mead blood in the crashing waves, recounting the legendary tearing of 9 sea beasts. King Hrothgar locked eyes with the Geatish champion.
You didn't just come for glory, Beowulf.
Hrothgar rumbled.
You came to settle an old blood debt. Your father, Ectheo, sparked a massive war when he slaughtered Heathelaf of the Wilfing tribe. The Geats were terrified of the fallout. They exiled him, and he fled across the crashing waves to my shores.
Hrothgar sighed, the weight of years pressing into his shoulders.
I was young then, a newly crowned king following the death of my brother, Heorot, a man far better than I'll ever be. I bought your father's life. I shipped chests of gold across the sea to the Wilfings to extinguish the feud, and Ectheo swore his loyalty to me until his dying breath.
The king's voice tightened with simmering rage.
It burns my soul to admit what Grendel has done to Heorot. My best men are vanishing into the dark. Fate feeds them straight into the jaws of that monster. I know the Almighty could crush this demon in an instant, but until then we bleed.
Hrothgar slammed a fist onto the armrest.
Countless times my warriors have pounded back ale and sworn on their swords to ambush Grendel in the night. And every morning, the sun rises on a slaughterhouse, benches splintered, the floor slick with guts and gore. I lose more veterans with every sunrise.
The old king forced a weary smile and waved his hand.
Enough of this darkness. Sit down, drink, feast. Regale us with the bloody tales of your victories.
Instantly, a massive wooden bench was cleared for the Geats. Beowulf and his heavily armed crew took their seats, radiating quiet menace and raw power. Servants scrambled to fill their heavy goblets with sweet, potent mead. A bard struck up a fierce, ringing song, cutting through the shadows in Heorot. For the first time in years, the great hall echoed with the booming laughter of Danes and Geats, united in the face of death. Chapter 9. Unferth challenged the glory that silenced Unferth. Laughter blooms once more in the golden feast hall. Unferth, son of Ecglaf, sat at King Hrothgar's feet, but he wasn't there to celebrate. He was burning with jealousy over Beowulf's rising legend. The Geats' sudden arrival, and the raw guts it took to cross the sea, rubbed the courtier the wrong way. Unferth couldn't stomach the idea of another warrior snatching more glory than him. He wanted to tear Beowulf down.
Are you that same Beowulf who raced Breca out on the open sea?
Unferth sneered, his voice cutting through the hall.
You two fools threw your lives away in the deep water, just to prove a point. It was a stupid, empty boast, and no one could talk you out of that suicidal stunt. You thrashed through the ocean currents, fighting freezing, wintry waves while the sea boiled around you.
Unferth leaned forward.
You struggled in the icy depths for 7 hellish nights, but guess what? Breca beat you. He overpowered you. When the sun finally rose, the current dumped him on the shores of the Heathorims. He marched home a hero, ruling the Brondings and their golden city. Breca backed up his boast and left you in his wake.
He laughed coldly.
So I fully expect you to fail here, Beowulf. You might have survived a few petty skirmishes, but you won't last a single night waiting for Grendel in Heorot.
Chapter 10. Beowulf's swimming contest with Breca. The hospitality of Queen Wealhtheow. The hero swears victory or a glorious death. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, locked eyes with Unferth and laughed.
Listen to yourself, Unferth. The beer is doing the talking for you. You run your mouth about Breca and our swimming race, but let's get the facts straight. Nobody on this earth has fought harder or survived worse in the churning sea than me. When we were boys, we made a reckless bet to risk our lives on the open ocean. We didn't back down. We hit the icy water with drawn swords in our hands, ready to butcher any sea beasts that wanted a taste. Breca couldn't outswim me, and I refused to leave him behind. We battled the currents shoulder to shoulder for 5 brutal nights. Then the storm hit. Freezing darkness fell like a hammer. A savage north wind ripped the ocean apart, churning the waves into a nightmare. The blood scent drove the sea monsters insane, but my forged chainmail held strong. A leviathan grabbed me in its crushing grip and dragged me down into the abyss. It thought I was prey. It was dead wrong. I drove my blade through its black heart and gutted the beast on the ocean floor. More monsters swarmed me in the black depths. I hacked them to pieces. They thought they'd feast on my flesh at the bottom of the sea. Instead, when the sun rose, their mangled corpses washed up on the shoreline, butchered by my sword. They'll never hunt sailors in the deep again. As the dawn broke and God's light burned across the sky, the raging waves died down. The cliffs appeared. Fate spares a warrior whose time hasn't come, if he's got the guts to fight. By the time it was over, I had slaughtered 9 sea fiends. I have never fought a bloodier battle under the stars, nor has any man survived worse odds in the abyss. I dragged myself onto the beaches of the Finns, utterly drained but alive. Now, Unferth, I've never heard anyone sing about your bloody sword fights. Neither you nor Breca have ever done anything remotely as daring. I don't need to boast, but I will speak the truth. Your only claim to fame is murdering your own brothers. You'll burn in hell for that, no matter how clever you think you are. Face the facts, Unferth. Grendel would never have butchered your people and humiliated your king if your blade was half as sharp as your tongue. He knows he doesn't have to fear the Danes. He slaughters you, feasts on you, and walks right out, laughing at your weakness. But playtime is over. I'm going to show this monster the raw, skull-crushing power of the Geats. And when the sun rises tomorrow, anyone who wants to drink in this hall will do it in peace.
Chapter 11. Queen Wealhtheow and the night watch. Night falls on Heorot. The warriors hold their breath for the coming blood hunt. Laughter roared through Heorot. The mood was electric, heavy with the promise of blood and victory. Queen Wealhtheow stepped into the firelight, draped in hammered gold. She moved with a regal grace, navigating the sea of armed men. First, she offered the jeweled drinking horn to Hrothgar. She wished the scarred king joy, a fierce reminder of the loyalty his people held for him. The old king drank deep, savoring the feast while he could. The Golden Queen moved through the ranks, offering the cup to fresh-faced youths and battle-hardened veterans alike. Finally, her path led her to Beowulf. She offered the goblet to the massive Geatish warlord. With sharp, knowing eyes, she thanked the gods that her desperate prayers were finally answered. Here was a true butcher of monsters, a champion she could trust to slaughter the nightmare plaguing her people. Beowulf took the cup. His blood ran hot, hungry for the slaughter to come.
When I launched my ships onto the black waves,
Beowulf snarled, his voice booming over the quiet hall.
I swore a blood oath. I would rip this curse from your kingdom, or I would die choking in the monster's grip.
He raised the cup, eyes blazing.
I will carve my legend in flesh and bone tonight, or this hall will become my tomb.
The queen smiled. His violent vow was exactly what she needed to hear. Gleaming in gold, she returned to her king's side. Courage flared through the hall once more, but the shadows were lengthening. Hrothgar knew the beast was coming. The second the sun vanished, the creature of the dark would stalk out from the night, hungry for slaughter. The king stood and the great hall fell silent. Hrothgar turned to Beowulf, locking eyes with the savage warrior.
Never,
Hrothgar boomed.
since I first learned to carry a shield and crack a skull, have I handed the keys of Heorot to another man. But tonight, it is yours.
The old king stepped closer.
Defend this glorious hall. Unleash your fury, watch the shadows, and remember the eternal glory of a warrior's death. Kill the beast and survive this night, and there is no treasure on earth I will deny you.
King Hrothgar took his leave. With his elite guard in tow, the old king abandoned the great hall of Heorot to join Queen Wealhtheow in her bedchamber. Doom arrives tearing through the pitch-black darkness. The hero silently waits for the monster's throat. He left the defense of the hall to a different kind of guard. Beowulf stepped up to hold the line in the dark. The Geat warlord didn't rely on steel. He trusted his own savage strength. Stripping off his heavy iron mail shirt, Beowulf tossed his helmet aside. He unbelted his legendary, rune-carved sword and shoved it into his servant's hands.
Guard my gear,
Beowulf ordered. Before he hit his cot, the hero turned to his men and laid down his final boast.
I don't blade any easier than Grendel.
He growled.
I won't use a blade to gut this beast, even though it would be easy work. The monster doesn't know how to parry or block. He only knows slaughter. So tonight, no weapons. If he wants a fist fight, I'll give him a fist fight. Let God Almighty pick the winner.
Beowulf dropped onto his bed, his head hitting the pillow. All around him, his hardened sea raiders crashed on the mead hall floor. Sleep took them, but it was a grim rest. Not a single man believed he would ever see his homeland again. The floorboards beneath them were still stained with the blood of slaughtered Danes, but destiny had other plans. The gods of war wove a bloody victory for the Geats, deciding that one man's raw, unstoppable might would crush the nightmare of Heorot. Deep in the black night the shadow moved. Grendel came gliding down from the misty moors, hunting for flesh. Inside the hall, the men tasked with defending it were dead to the world in sleep, all except one. Beowulf lay wide awake in the suffocating dark. His blood boiled. His heart hammered like a war drum. He stared into the shadows, fists clenched, waiting for the slaughter to begin. Chapter 13. The battle in the hall, a massacre unfolding in the blink of an eye, and finally the explosive grip of the hero. Grendel stalked from the misty moors, carrying the wrath of God himself. The twisted beast hungered for human flesh, his sights set on the great hall. He slinked through the fog until he spotted Heorot, the gold-trimmed fortress of men, gleaming like a beacon in the night. He'd raided Hrothgar's home plenty of times before, but tonight his luck had run out. The monster was about to meet the deadliest guard he would ever face. The hellspawn reached the heavy doors. Forged iron bands held them shut, but they shattered like glass the second he shoved them. Fueled by demonic rage, Grendel ripped the entrance wide open and stomped onto the polished floor. A sickly, unnatural fire burned in his eyes. He scanned the dark room and saw a gold mine of sleeping heroes, warriors packed shoulder to shoulder, dead to the world. Grendel's twisted heart pounded with glee. He planned to slaughter every last one of them before sunrise. It was going to be a bloodbath, a feast fit for a demon, but fate had a different plan. After tonight, Grendel would never taste human flesh again. From the shadows, Beowulf lay awake. Hygelac's champion watched the beast with predatory focus, waiting to see his opening move. Grendel wasted no time. He lunged at a sleeping warrior, tearing the man to shreds in seconds. He crunched through bone, drank hot blood straight from the veins, and devoured him in massive, ravenous bites. Hands, feet, everything swallowed whole. Nothing was left. Still hungry, the demon crept closer. He reached out a massive, clawed hand to rip Beowulf from his bed. But as the monster lunged, Beowulf struck. The hero clamped his iron-hard fingers around Grendel's outstretched arm, pivoting his weight and locking the beast in a crushing death grip. The moment those fingers dug into his flesh, panic spiked through the monster's veins. In all his miserable life, Grendel had never felt strength like this. No mortal man possessed power so terrifying. Frantic, the beast tried to jerk away, but he was trapped in a vise. Pure fear seized his mind. He just wanted to break free, run back to the dark, and hide with the rest of Hell's rejects. But there was no escape. Beowulf had him, and Heorot was about to become the monster's slaughterhouse. Chapter 14. The victory in Grendel's torn arm. The feast hall shatters. The tearing screams of the monster rip the darkness to shreds. Beowulf remembered his promise. He surged to his feet and clamped his hands around the monster. Crack! Grendel's fingers snapped under the crushing pressure. The giant thrashed, desperate to tear away, but the hero drove forward, tightening his iron grip. Panic seized the beast. He just wanted to run, to slither back to his swampy hell hole, realizing his claws were caught in the most terrifying grasp on earth. Coming to Heorot was the worst mistake the destroyer had ever made. The great hall exploded with the thunder of their brawl. Pure terror gripped the Danes as the two titans clashed, shaking the building to its core. It was a miracle the grand feast hall didn't collapse under their absolute fury. It held fast, bound inside and out by masterful iron bands. Still, their brutal struggle ripped gold-plated benches straight from the floorboards. The Danes had sworn no living thing could ever break Heorot apart. Only fire could consume it. Now they weren't so sure. A new, horrifying sound shattered the night. A shriek so foul it struck dread into every warrior who heard it echoing through the timber walls. It was the enemy of God, screaming a song of absolute defeat. A joyless, agonizing wail tearing from the throat of hell's own captive. Beowulf, the strongest man alive, refused to let go. He had no intention of letting this murderous freak escape. Grendel's life was worth less than dirt. Around the brawl, Beowulf's warriors sprang into action. They drew their ancestral swords, rushing into the fray to protect their lord. They hacked and slashed from every angle, desperate to butcher the beast. But they didn't know the dark truth. No sword on earth, not even the finest forged steel, could scratch the monster. Grendel had woven a dark spell over all mortal blades, rendering them completely useless against his cursed hide. Chapter 15. The defeat of Grendel the demon flees with a fatal wound. A perfect morning finally dawns on the cursed hall. Grendel was doomed. Destined for a miserable, agonizing death, his evil spirit was holding a one-way ticket to hell. The monster had waged a brutal war against mankind and God himself, but now he realized the terrifying truth. His own body was failing him. Beowulf crushed the beast's hand in an iron grip. The hatred radiating between them was absolute and deadly. Then came the horrific, fatal injury. A massive, gaping tear ripped open Grendel's shoulder. Sinews snapped like rotten twine. Bones splintered and cracked under the Geatish hero's relentless, ungodly pressure. Supreme glory belonged to Beowulf. Bleeding out and screaming in agony, Grendel tore himself free, forced to stumble down the muddy swamp slopes toward his miserable, joyless lair. The monster knew his time was up. His final hour had arrived. The bloody battle was over. The Danes finally had their revenge. This savage warrior from a distant land had ripped Hrothgar's hall from the brink of total ruin. Beowulf basked in the bloody aftermath of his brutal night's work. The Geatish warlord had backed up his boast with savage action. In a single night, he had wiped away years of terror, distress, and sorrow for the Danes. As the ultimate trophy, Beowulf hoisted his gruesome prize high under the soaring roof of Heorot. Grendel's severed hand, arm, and shredded shoulder hung there, the monster's massive claw on full display, dripping with the proof of a hero's absolute victory.